Welcome back to Over the Edge podcast. This week, we have a very inspiring guest, an incredible artist, Kenisha Gill. Kenisha Gill is a Los Angeles based branding and portrait photographer who left a 14-year career in fashion design to pursue her passion for capturing joyful energy and helping others showcase their best selves. As a former head clothing designer at Walmart, she now focuses on supporting female business owners with high-quality personal branding, photos, marketing, and a touch of inspiration. She believes in living life on her terms and finds fulfillment in the creative and unique aspects of photography. Kenisha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Your story is awesome. And so I was hoping you could share with us a little bit about kind of the journey that you went on to get to where you are today.
Oh gosh. Okay, so for me, I am kind of an all or nothing type of gal. Take it if it's either good or bad, but I'm all or nothing. So for me, when I decided I didn't want to be a designer anymore, I was like, I just need a break. I need to figure out what I want to do. I just know spending this amount of hours in an office arguing about a button is not conducive to my life. In 2018, I took a break from fashion design. I told myself, okay, I'm going to just travel for a bit. If I find myself wanting to do the same things or feeling the need to design or do market research and be in the stores, okay, I'll go back to fashion design. Went on a trip, didn't think about it twice, but I always had my camera with me. So I was like, I've always enjoyed photography, but I never really gave myself a shot to make it into a business or even a full hobby. So I was like, I'm just gonna, when I get back, that's what I'm going to do. So I literally left the fashion industry, picked up a camera in like 2018. I was like, I'm a photographer, I'm starting my business. Let me learn how to use this camera and went straight into it. I did like what most photographers do, and like thought weddings were the only way to make money, or thought, you had to shoot maternity to do certain things. I'm like, but that's not really where my passion lies. Like I find myself always really excited to talk to other business owners, entrepreneurs to figure out like how we can market creative ways to do things. And I'm like, I didn't find myself looking at maternity clothes or wedding dresses and be like, oh, this would be a great place to do this. And I'm like, maybe that's not where it's at. Because I also want to be a resource to my clients. Like I want to be able to give them information. I always found with entrepreneurship and with business owners, I'm like, I always had an idea. So I was like, okay, let's just marry the two and focus in on just personal branding. And so that's really my hyper focus now, is really making sure that business owners can like step into their dream, because a lot of us running the business is our dream, and so it's not easy. It's super hard sometimes. So I like to be like that supportive photographer that's like, okay, we're gonna get great photos, but we're also gonna figure a way to make your business profitable and make it make sense.
And I
So
can personally like attest to this because I have been in front of your camera and it was an incredible experience. And I really want to talk about the design part of your story because I really feel like that okay, wait, instead of just saying I feel like it plays a part in like how you view things as a photographer, let me ask, what brought you to design to begin with? And then how has your experience in design played into your work as a photographer?
for me, I always say like every shoot, even though it might be for personal branding, people are like, oh, it's so repetitive. I'm like, no, every client is so different. Just like when I was a designer, like every store was so different. Their target audience was so different. So for me, all those years of experience of walking into a store and knowing the mindset of how to design for Walmart versus how to design for JC Penney's or Macy's, like each like client that walked through that store was different. And I had to always wear different hats when I was working. Like, okay, this vignette could be for here, this could be for here, this might cross over here. So it's like always that project mindset where like every target audience is different. I kind of find like that helped me to figure out personal branding with my clients, because each of their audiences are different. So I'm always designing a shoot that fits for them and their audience. So I'm like, a lot of that kind of like client work really helps me when it comes to photography, because I don't like to just be like the photographer that just shows up and like, okay, what are we doing today? And I'm like, you're spending way too much money in your business to not have a plan. So then I'm more of the planner of the photography part. I'm like, yes, it is photos, and yes, but I'm like, it's also how you're connecting with your audience and in turn getting now business. So you have to
Mhm.
think of it that way, not so much just like I'm here. Let's shoot.
No, I love that. And like that is so apparent looking at your work. Like your work just immediately stood out to me. I think I found you, I was on Instagram and I was scrolling and like your photos stopped my scroll and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so, so gorgeous. And so I can really like it's really apparent like how much care you put into that. Can you talk a little bit about like what that process looks like when you're working with somebody and you're thinking about them as a unique person and brand and who they're trying to connect with?
Yeah, so I always go through like this, like after they book me, we always go through a discovery call phase. And in that discovery call, it's like about an hour. And this is where I get to hear someone speak about their business and how they want to connect. And I always listen to keywords that they say and how they want their brand to resonate with potential clients. And then I start building the shoot from there. It's all in that conversation. Like we go through a lot of questions. I used to send like a questionnaire, but I'm like, I feel like people would overthink it and try to tell me what they think is right versus having an honest conversation about your business. Because I'm like, where you're at now in your business versus where you're going to be are very different. But when I talk to them on the phone or via Zoom, I'm like, okay, I can get a feeling about where they are now and what they're trying to achieve. Because I know everything's like a building block. So I'm like, okay, we definitely have a big audience in mind, but sometimes we have to build the smaller audience before you could just jump into something. Like some people are like, oh, I want to be get on these speaking engagements and be on a panel at Amazon. I'm like, okay, but if you haven't spoken to 10 people, I can't put you in front of 10,000. So we start building those principles out that way. So I'm like, it's really about that discovery call phase and
Mm.
listening to their keywords, understanding what they're thinking their brand is, and not just typography or color. And I'm like, that's the pretty part, but like, what's your brand experience? And what do you want people to take away from that? I always say it's like a cake. You want a beautifully decorated cake, but you also need to taste good on the inside. Like we've all been to those weddings where the cake is amazing and there's fondant and all this, and then it's all left on the table because nobody ate it because the inside was crap. And I'm like, we got to work on the inside, and then we decorate.
That is such a good analogy and it's so, so true. And I found the same thing when it comes to like client questionnaires. Like I find that people there's such a difference like in a questionnaire people kind of put who they think they should be. But when you're actually speaking to them, it can become a different like such a more rich story and I love that part. And so when you're talking to a client and kind of getting a sense of them, what are some things that like make you really excited, like as a photographer, as a brand expert? What are some things that, like when you hear it, like it makes you so excited for a project?
I think when they're willing to do something a little different, or they're just sometimes they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, perfect. Clean slate, versus when you're trying to maybe fix something that someone else put into place.
Mhm.
I really love when people are like, I'm awkward in front of the camera. I'm like, perfect. We're gonna have the best time because we're probably gonna be laughing at how awkward we both are, and then that's fantastic. I get the more authentic smiles and more friendly things. But usually when I speak to a client, I'm like, I just want to know really your brand story and what drives you and makes you get up every day and work on something. So I really kind of like hone in and really fixate on that part. So I'm like, your picture should resonate with you because and your audience because it's part of your story. And I want it to
Mhm.
feel authentic and not this different version that you can't keep up with. Cause I feel like that's where a lot of people like fail. Cause I'm like, you're trying to put on a costume every day and it gets exhausting versus waking up and being authentically you. And I'm like, let's just resonate just on what works for you.
Yeah. I feel like lately in probably in the industry overall, I feel like people are more getting into like letting that version go of them that's like kind of like putting on that costume and people I feel like are becoming more themselves. Like I feel like it feels more genuine. I don't know, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I feel like I love the more genuine part because I feel like a lot of people were chasing the algorithm. I'm like, the algorithm is
Mm,
it's so against a lot of people. So I'm like, you might as well just be yourself and put on a bunch of content or let people get to know you because I feel like people are investing in that. And now with more of AI and chat GPT, I'm like, yes, it's a great tool to maybe improve something, but don't let
mhm.
it dictate your life because then you can't keep up with it. Because if they change your algorithm, the writing might be different, the outcomes might be different. So I'm like, just let people invest in you, especially as a small business. I feel like a lot of people are like, they want to know
Mhm.
about the business owner. And I'm like, for some reason, they don't go to Target and ask these questions, but whatever. They want to know like your whole life story, what drives you. And I'm like, okay, cool. I rather share portions of my authentic story and be vulnerable in certain chapters so that people can understand why I'm in business. And I feel like then they gravitate towards you more.
Yes, I love that. Okay, speaking of story, can we talk about how you have traveled to 34 countries? Is that the correct number still?
Oh gosh. I think maybe I'm at 36 now. I probably just haven't
Wow.
updated it. Yeah.
So what have been, can you tell us about some of your favorite travel adventures?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so there, when I left fashion, that took a bulk of my traveling because I was backpacking.
Mhm.
And so I literally, in my mind, I planned it. And when I looked at my notes, I'm like, I didn't plan anything. I planned to make maybe the first 2 weeks. And then I left room for like suggestions. I would like book
Mhm.
hostels, like, oh, you should go here next. I'm like, cool, book it. Especially in Europe, it's a lot cheaper. Like you can kind of
Mhm.
work on the fly. So for me, there's points where I was just bouncing to different countries. At one point, I moved in with like this family in Italy for like 3.5 weeks. I like built her website and trade for like housing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I like moved in with her family and I was just like, yeah, we had family dinners and it was part of this program. I can't remember the website right now, but it's part of a program. You can like list your skill sets and then someone will match with you and they'll host you
Oh, cool.
for time. So I'm like, it was a great time to like settle on how many different locations I was hitting. And I'm like, okay, I can just live at this house for a bit. And they had this beautiful beach house on the coast of Italy, and I just kind of like lived there for a couple weeks, and all I had to do was like build their website.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I love
I feel
that.
like Italy was always like one of my favorite places to go. I also did this trip primarily solo, and I always recommend it to people. I'm like, just do it, even if you
Mhm.
only travel for a week. Like a solo trip will take
Mhm.
you so far out your comfort zone, but you meet some amazing people sometimes when you are by yourself. Because people are like, oh, why is this person by themselves? Let's chit chat.
Mhm.
I've had random dinners with people via Google Translate. I had dinner with this lady in Italy, in Naples for like 3 hours until our phones were dying because we were just using Google Translate. And I was like, this is perfect. When will I ever just have a random dinner with someone and connect with them that way? So
Amazing. What do you feel like in your traveling? What is something that you feel like you learned about yourself?
Mm, I think that I'm a lot braver than I thought I was.
Mm.
Because to get up every day and just not know what you're doing, especially as a person who is a planner by nature, to get up and just be like, okay, whatever the day takes me, I'll
Mm.
be okay with it. Um, it's okay to just buy a ticket and figure it out. It's okay to just kind of like wander around and figure out what, drives you and what calls your name and what you connect with. I'm like, that was kind of the best part. And I feel like it takes a little bravery to kind of step out and be like, okay, I'm just gonna pack this bag and be out here solo and not be stressed about it and just do it.
I think that's one of my favorite parts about like taking on like big adventures like that. Like I think people stop themselves because they think it's a major, like there's a lot of things in their way. But sometimes it
Yeah,
really does come down to like pack a bag, buy a ticket, which is amazing.
yeah,
And you're really putting so much trust in yourself. And oh, I love that.
yeah. And it's like things will happen.
Mhm.
Um, so okay, so on this backpacking trip, I will tell you. I think I was 4 days in. I went to Spain first and I met this, I was at this hostel, met some great people. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to Mallorca, which is a smaller island off the coast of Spain. My friend's like, oh, just take the train, super easy. And I was like, oh, I kind of just want to take a Uber. Like, I don't know if I'm a public transportation gal, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So he's like, no, it'll be fine. I get on the train and I was like, I knew I didn't like this train situation. The train was packed. Spain is also very known for the pickpocketing. So I'm on this train with all of my stuff, and then when my station opens, all these people get off the train, and my purse is open, and my wallet's gone. And I'm like,
No.
I'm on my way to the airport. What am I gonna do? And so being a grown mid-30 person, background change.
If you're listening,
Being in my
I
mid-30s, We both were like, what is happening in the background?
I know, I was like, what's going on there? If you're listening, there were just fireworks that went off in my Zoom, and
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's probably because I was like had an astonished face on, like, oh my gosh, you're on the way to the airport. You just realized.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm on my way to the airport. I look in my bag, my wallet's gone. I'm like, what do I do? So, mid-30s, what do? You call your mom. I'm like, Mom.
Mhm.
She was like
Mhm.
sleep in the middle of the night. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, my wallet's gone. And I'm all upset. And she's like, okay, I think she was trying to like wake up and figure out what she's gonna help with. And I was like, she's like, okay, just stop and pray about it. And I think you should just distract me. She just pray about it. Let's just figure it out. Just take a minute. And then I'm like praying in the middle of the subway, like in the
Yeah.
walkway. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I'm on my way to the airport. I don't have my passport anymore. Like, I don't have anything. I'm walking out, and my wallet is sitting on top of the trash can, just laying there. And I was like, oh my God, my wallet's here. Everything was in it except for the cash. So they literally just took my wallet, took the cash, and just left it there for me to find it. Thank God I got off on that station. And they're like, my mom's like, you need to pay more attention. I was like, it's only day 4 and I've already been robbed. But it made me wise up to be like, okay, this is a fun trip, but you
Mhm.
also need to be on top of your game, right? And so
Mhm.
after that, it was like more precautions. You're a walking target, you got a backpack, you got your, all your things. After that, I was like, okay, I need to pay more attention. But God definitely was like,
Yeah.
okay, you can be out here, but this is your one warning. And I was like, okay, I understand.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. And what a great message that's also like, I've got your back. Like, things happen, I've got
Yeah.
your back. Like, that's
He's like,
amazing.
you can be out here and figure it out, but pay attention. I was like,
Pay
okay. So then
attention.
after that, I was like hiding. I usually always hide money and hide different things. I usually don't keep everything together, but I was just so excited. I'm like, oh, I'm here. I quit my job. I sold all my stuff. I'm out here. No, no, no. Pay attention.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so while you were traveling, do you feel like your art and your eye as an artist grew or shifted or changed at all?
While I was traveling, not so much, because I think I was so focused on just the experience
Mhm.
that even though I was like taking pictures and like enjoying the process of it, it wasn't more so like how I do photography now in service of others.
Mhm.
I was just like, I just want to be here and figure out what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Um, it does, I feel like with the internet now, I feel like sometimes travel photography or things have to be such an aesthetic and such a thing. And I'm like,
Mhm.
sometimes like I just want to capture that I'm here. And I kind of love old school cheesy like 90s photography where you're just staying in front of the building and that's it. Like I don't know if I want to make it like a whole like romantic, aesthetic vibe. I'm like, sometimes I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm just happy that I am here and I'm in front of this building and I'm in this different place and more so capturing the moments versus this, finding locations and putting pretty outfits together and being here. And I'm like, I also travel very light. So I'm like, I'm in a
Mhm.
carry-on. I'm literally like most trips are in a carry-on. I'm like, that's my photo outfit and the rest, I'm just here to enjoy. So if it's not aesthetically pleasing, just know I had a good time.
I love it. Okay, so you are an amazing photographer and also you are a branding expert. Can you tell us a little bit about your like philosophy behind branding, looking at brands, design, like what you think of when you're looking at brand design, like what your kind of ethos and spirit is when it comes to branding?
Yeah, so for me, I think a lot of people get stuck in like again, the aesthetic of a brand and I'm like that's great, but I'm all about the experience of a brand. And I
Mhm.
think I always tell my clients I'm like it's really how people engage with you and the experience they have with you that is part of your brand. I think a lot of people forget that and they're like, oh, I do this. But I'm like, it's hard for, clients to book you. It's hard for them to communicate with you. There's no boundaries. There's no experience. They don't, are you gifting them or how are we treating them? Are they, wanting to come back? And I feel like that's my biggest thing with my clients now. I'm like, what is your brand experience when people meet you in your business? What are people going, what's the interaction like? Like when you shop at Target, what kind of energy you're gonna get versus when you shop at Walmart. I'm like,
Mhm.
what is your brand energy? It's like, do they technically have similar things? 100%. But we
Mhm.
go to one place for a reason. Even when you're booking, buying something off a website, that experience is part of the brand process. So I always try to tell my clients, like, it's not just our
Mm,
visuals, it's not just a pretty picture, it's also messaging, interaction. How are they able to pay you? Client retention, like all the
yeah.
things. Like, are you following up? Are you on time? Are you over delivering? Your price points, all of those things kind of come into factor. So I always say, like, as a brand strategist, like, I'm not more of the marketing brand strategist, more
Mhm.
of like the client relation and business building when it comes to your brand strategy.
Okay, so talking about over delivering, this is always something that I struggle with. I over deliver and I don't need to. And I don't think anybody like I don't think anybody goes like, wow, that experience was great because she over and by that I mean like literal number of photos,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so when you can help people identify these kinds of things, how do you recommend that they shift? Because I always feel like no matter how hard I try to not over deliver on photos, I just still do it. Like how when you're when you're working with people and like you're seeing these like issues they're coming up against, how do you guide them through that shift and that like I feel like probably resistance a little bit. Like how do you walk them through it?
Yeah, we start with the foundation and the base first, like, because I
Mhm,
feel like some people might over deliver. Let's say,
mhm,
as a photographer, maybe you quote 10 photos and then you're over here sending 50.
mhm.
But are these over deliveries actually like beneficial to the person receiving them?
Yeah.
Because sometimes a lot more things can confuse someone versus being strategic about things. So it's like also looking at, like, when we're over delivering on something, or when we're creating that outline, also create the base foundation, and then the extra things should be added. Um, or like it should be like a dessert, right? Because I feel like sometimes people will over deliver, but if it's not something you can keep up with, now you're kind of bringing your client's experience down because they are expecting this every time.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, okay, let's create an outline that makes sense, that we can always deliver. And then whatever a little bit outside of that is bonus, great. But can you make sure you always deliver that? You don't
Mhm.
want to give someone 100 photos that one time and then they come back again thinking they're going to get 100 photos again. And you only give them 10 because you were tired. And they're like, oh. And so you have to make
Yeah.
sure you keep up with that. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so when you're looking at projects overall, um, with your expertise as a photographer, as an artist, designer, and brand expert, what is one thing that you always recommend people do, and one thing that you always recommend people do not do?
When it comes, say that one more time. When it comes to like all of their, like a photo shoot, when it comes to a full project.
Yeah,
Okay, so
either way, whatever you think. Yeah.
yeah, so for using my branding clients, I was telling them, do not, one of my don'ts is, do not go and buy things that you would normally not buy to show up in a photo shoot in.
Ooh.
Because people come again in these costumes. And I'm like, if you are, let's say, an esthetician, and every time you're in your salon and you're working with the client, you're always in scrubs, let's not show up in a pantsuit.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
who they booked online and versus who they're meeting are two different. And then now we're having, immediately as a customer, you might have that feeling of distrust because now it's like some things are not aligning, right?
Mhm.
And then now maybe they're leery about the offering, like, oh, is she going to charge me for you know what I mean? So it's like you got
Mhm.
to make sure that however you show up for your photos is how you also show up in the real world. And I would just say a little more polished. So if you always
Mm.
just wear white tee and jeans, fantastic. Just make sure those jeans fit you properly, and maybe you get a new shirt so there's no stains on it, but if that's your aesthetic, let's stay within it. So
Mhm.
that's one of my big don'ts. I'm like, don't show up in a costume. Let's not wear
Mhm.
things that we would never actually wear or no one's ever going to see us in. Um, my biggest do is to figure out where we're using the photos. And
Mm.
that's what we kind of go over in a discovery call. Because a lot of people pick a bunch of portrait size photos for social. And I'm like, but we were redoing your website. Where are your landing pages? Where are your marketing materials? We had a plan for, like, launching a newsletter. We have to make sure we get the right um marketing collateral for that. So sometimes
Mhm.
people are like, oh, I love this, I'm gonna post this, oh, people are gonna love that. And I'm like, wait, what are we actually what are we actually trying to achieve with our photos is my question. I'm like, okay, if we're redoing our website, if we're launching a product, where's the product?
Mhm.
Are we dropping it right now or are we dropping fourth quarter? Like, let's be intentional about how we're shooting and what we're shooting for sure.
I love that. Okay, so something else that I love about your photos is your lighting. I always feel like your lighting is gorgeous. Everybody that is in your photos looks stunning, 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 gorgeous.
Thank
How do you
you.
approach how do you approach your lighting?
Mm. I feel like my lighting, I'm pretty consistent with the same thing. Like I'm usually a two light setup type of girl,
Mhm,
but I would also I just like my lighting to be bright and crisp and just like really clean,
mhm,
but not I'm not light and airy. But I just like my lighting to also make my clients pop, especially when they get, I feel like when you get good makeup done, like that good lighting and that skin just pops and everything just kind of like melts together. I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. But for the most
Absolutely.
part, I'm like, two lights are usually my thing.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll cut down to one, but I love just like really clean light.
Mm, I love that. Okay, so when you are thinking about a shoot and planning things out, like what do you look to for inspiration?
Mm. Um, Usually like I'm usually on Pinterest and I start creating boards and then I'll kind of break that into their shoots because I usually divide my shoots into three different things. But it kind of depends on the client and what how they want to use their photos and how they want to show up online. Um, so sometimes it's magazine tears, sometimes it's, sometimes I'll see things on Instagram that I'll save and just have to like pull into Pinterest or onto my Canva boards. But I try to pull things for them that make sense to their branding. And I always say it's just inspiration. This is kind of the overall vibe, but like once you put the right, that client in there, put their brand colors in there, put their product in, I feel like everything starts to like take its own shape. So
Mhm.
I just kind of create a little bit of outline. So I'm like, okay, I'm thinking we'll do something here. This is what I'm kind of thinking for lighting. This is how I want to approach this. This is how I want to shoot your product. But everything, once you plug in all their individual things, it's still kind of like a brand new shoot.
Mm, I love that. So what is when you are thinking about like the people that you love working with, when you're thinking about like creatives and entrepreneurs and brands, what do you feel like is your central message to people?
For me, I think my central message is I want them to show up confidently online, whatever
Mhm,
that looks like for them. Um, and I want them to just kind of own their marketing when it comes to it. Like we all know the industry changes, the marketing changes, everyone's into this, but I want them to show up confidently in whatever that is for them.
mm. What do you feel like in terms of like trending in the industry right now? What are you seeing more of lately?
I feel like there's a bigger shift into being more authentic,
Mhm.
and not as produced content.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
feel like that still creates like a little bit of strategy,
Mhm.
um, just so we don't get chaos, right? It's
Yes.
like I love the content where, everyone's like, this is what I'm going through,
Mhm.
or I have a client who's struggling with packaging right now, and I'm like, keep sharing that story because by the time we get to the shoot and it's all settled, they've been on that brand story with you. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I like the authenticity there,
Mhm.
but you don't have to be online crying or having a
Mm.
meltdown, falling down the wall. Like that to me is a little cringe. But I'm like, be authentic, share your story, and like allow people to be on that journey with you because I think your audience is super nosy. They want to
Yes.
know. They want to know all the things. And I'm like, and then it creates conversation about other things. And that's how you
Mhm.
really get like a genuine audience and like connection with people. And they're like, they know the small things. They feel like they know you,
Mhm.
even though you may have only shared like a couple different things. But they're like, oh, I remember when you did that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Right? I so
Yeah.
how do you know where to, like, find that line? This is a question I used to get a lot, and it's one, like, that I'm actually struggling with right now because I used to share a ton of stuff online, and now I'm in a space where I'm like, I don't wanna hardly share anything personal, which is also not
Yeah.
necessarily the way to go. So how do you find that balance between sharing that stuff that feels, like, genuine and authentic, and then not oversharing or sharing too much?
Yeah, 100%. So like I feel like there's a crowd that like overshares, right?
Mhm.
I like to think of my audience as someone I'm maybe meeting up with to have coffee with.
Mm.
They're not, my audience isn't my best friend.
Mhm.
Or my best friend might get the raw, like this is what's going on, the highs and the lows and all the things. But I'm like, I feel like someone I would network with or go to coffee with would get these highs and lows, but maybe not the
Mm,
full like emotional breakdown, So I'm
yeah.
trying to think of like if my audience was anyone, it would be someone I was meeting for coffee or trying to connect with, but it doesn't have to be my best friend who already knows, all the things. all the so I think
Yeah.
that allows me to not overshare, but to share things that feel like, oh, this feels like a fun day that I want to share with a friend over coffee versus my friend who listened to me rant on the way to this location type of thing.
Okay, I love that, and I'm going to start using that because I feel like I've been holding back too much. Like I got married last year. I did not even post about it, but that
Yeah.
would be something fun to like connect with, and I would definitely share that over a coffee.
Yeah.
What a great, I love that. That's such a good tool.
And I
Um,
think it allows us to create a little separation and boundaries so you don't feel like you have to show up online for because that could
yeah.
be exhausting. And it's
Yeah.
like when you share everything, you have to show up online all the time for things. But I'm like, oh, I don't think I want to be on
Yeah,
Wednesday.
that's where I ended up. Like, I was for so long sharing so much. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, I understood like this is the way social media is built a little bit, but it felt like such a one-way conversation at a certain point. Like for a long time, it felt like I was having a conversation with people. So sharing felt really fun. And then it felt like
Yeah,
more of a one-way conversation. And I was like, this is less fun. I pulled back for a long time. So finding that balance can be kind of tricky.
yeah. But
Mhm.
then you also want to be consistent. So that's why I say
Yeah.
like find that balance of what you want to share. And so it makes it a little easier to be consistent
Mhm.
than feeling the need to overshare. And then now you always feel like you're tied to social media. And then you get that social
Mhm.
media fatigue because you're like, oh, I'm always on here. You never really get that break when you don't set your boundary.
Exactly. Okay, I have one more question, my favorite sliding doors question. But before we do that, tell us about what you have coming up. How can people find you and connect with you and work with you?
Okay, perfect. So you can find me on Instagram at kgill photography, or you can find me on my website at www.kgillphoto.com. Um, the branding names are kind of consistent. It's all over the board. Right now I am working into quarter 4. We're going to be dropping quarter 4 mini sessions, and I'm also going to be hosting new webinars with Build a Better Brand. Within Build a Better Brand, it is like the overall figuring out your brand, your branding, and including photo shoots. So Build a Better Brand is a membership program where you go through developing your brand story, your business layout, your content layouts, and then every quarter we have photo shoots to make sure we have content for each segment of these things that we are working on. I just want to make sure that everyone who's launching their dream business, it can be successful because it's hard, but
Mhm.
also creating boundaries so you're not doing the 24/7 work that I feel like old school business
Mm.
owners tell us, like, you have to work all the time if you want to be successful. I'm like, you have to work really hard, but I think there's a way to work hard and be strategic
Mhm.
so that you can also enjoy your life. Because at the end of the day, I'm like, each day is, the next day is not promised. So I'm like, enjoy your life while we're still doing this. So that's kind of where I'm at right now for quarter 4. I just want people to continue to invest in their business and I can help wherever they need me.
I love that. And all of those links are going to be in the show notes, you guys. So go down, check the show notes, easy clicking. And let me just personally recommend working with Kenisha. My experience with you was incredible. And I felt so beautiful in my photos and in front of your camera. So highly recommend you guys like do the mini sessions for sure. And go check out her work. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So let's do a sliding doors question. My sliding doors question is, what is one small thing that happened in your life that maybe seemed inconsequential or maybe didn't, but what's one small thing that led to a huge change?
Okay, okay, it was actually a purchase of a book.
Oh.
I was in the airport. I got delayed. I was heading to Walmart with one of my sales team members to go present my line, and I was tired. I was, working 24/7 and trying to get this line done. Then the flight gets delayed, and I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, I'm gonna go to the bookstore and see if I can find a book. And there's a book called Mindful Manifesto. I want to see if it's on my desk. It's actually on my bed, but I'll send you the link to the book. But I started reading the book on the plane, and it's all about shifting your mindset and like finding your own balance and happiness. And I feel like from that point was my point of figuring out what I wanted to do because what I was doing wasn't making me happy. And there's too many hours in the day invested in this pocket of unhappiness
Mm.
that I was like, I don't think I want to do this. The money's great. I get to travel a lot, but I hate it. So I think being on that plane with the salesperson that I did not get along with, buying that book was like the start to like, I need something to change and I need to
Mm.
make that change. And then from there was, you know, figuring out my exit plan, figuring out what was next, and
Mhm.
then now slow rolling into like, this is it. This is I really enjoy doing this. So I'm like, this is where I invest a lot of my energy to make it work.
That's amazing because the leaving a job that like the money's good, like it's a steady job to go pursue something that is fully you and fully exciting and like chase the dream. That can be really
Yeah.
big and scary. How did you, in your mind, like how did you make that leap, like to the point where you felt like, you know what, I can do this?
I think it's either like you got to leap or not leap. I always
Mm.
knew that with every change, I'm like, I already know me. Like, I'll work hard at something. So I'm like, if it's here or if it's there, it's like I just have to make the shift and being
Mhm.
okay with being a beginner again. I think
Mm.
that's a very humbling part, especially when you come from like, at that point, I was a department head and I was leading my departments and I had teams and I had all these things. And I'm like, and then now to switch and be like, I'm literally now an intern for another photographer because I want to learn. It's
Mhm.
like, went from ordering people around to taking orders. And I'm like, that's
Yeah.
different. But it's like being okay with it. Like, okay, where I'm at now is not where I'm
Mhm.
going to be because it's part of the bigger picture. And I think a lot of people don't like being the beginner again.
Mhm.
And so they skip it because they're like, oh, I want to do this, but who am I to take orders from this person? I'm like, you're the beginner, and it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And being open to being a beginner, I feel like it's a big ego check sometimes for a
Oh,
lot of people.
truly.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh man, I'm over here doing stuff I ain't done since I was 19. Like, go get coffee. I'm like, coffee? That I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. That's my role today. But if you want to be in the room and learn, um, checking your ego at the door is something that you definitely have to do when you are starting over. But it's okay because I feel like
Mhm.
it's temporary. And a lot of
Mhm.
I feel like I meet a lot of people who like, oh, starting over is terrible. I'm like, yeah, but then I don't have to be in that same space for a long time. It
Yeah.
will, or as long as I'm open to it and learning quick, I don't want to be in the space of intern for a very long time. It's like, let's do this for a couple months. Let me learn as much as I can and move on.
Yeah, exactly. The most growth I ever had in my work was when I was assisting and working for other photographers and learning from them. Like those were such incredible and very like the experiences were where it went from like in my old career, I got to like call the shots a lot of the time, but going to being an assistant or managing a studio for somebody, I was just like, oh my gosh, like sometimes I had such like incredible learning experiences. And then sometimes I felt like I was embarrassing myself all of the time. And I
Yeah,
probably wasn't, but it felt like I just want to turn and run. Like, do I even know what I'm doing? I didn't feel like I did, but
right.
I figured it out. But, and I so fully agree. Like those experiences, like just were the thing that made all the difference in this career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like like at no age are you done learning. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of like they get to a certain point, like, well, I'm this age and I should be here and I should be doing these things. So I'm gonna, put this hat on. I'm like, but if you haven't learned the precepts, you're just kind of setting yourself up for like a little bit of
Mhm.
failure. I'm like, at no point at any age are you done learning, is my thing. So I'm just like, it's okay to learn. I learn all the time from my clients. I adjust sometimes processes because I'm like, oh, these steps didn't work well for someone. Okay, so I need to adjust. And I feel like a lot of business owners need to stop and do that because they think like, oh, well, they just don't get it. And I'm like, well, if you're here to serve them,
Mhm.
and if they're not understanding your steps, some people don't. Obviously,
Mhm.
some people don't. They don't read or they miss the steps. But what is the best way to communicate with people or to get the best outcome? And you have to constantly keep learning from your clients and your experiences.
Truly. There was one client I learned from early on where it was right when I was getting into brand photography into the field. And so my client process wasn't set yet. And I was still trying to figure out what it should be. And I had one client who said, this process wasn't really what I thought it would be. I don't really like how the process went. This was before we even got to the shoot. And I felt terrible, but I was like, yeah, please tell me in what ways
Yeah.
you like I can fix this, and how can we support you. And then she came back a few years later and loved the process, right? Because I was willing to
Okay.
learn from her and understand like what was not working and what went
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Fully agree. Thank you so
I also put
much.
the book in the chat.
Oh,
The
perfect.
Motivation Mindset. So.
I'm gonna put that book in. I'm gonna order it and I'm gonna put it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Kenisha. Like, this was such a great conversation. I had so much fun having you on today.
Perfect. I appreciate it. This was so much fun. I'm always like, speaking engagements. This was easy. This was fun.
Oh, good. Well, it was awesome. I loved it.